You're watching MATTtV.
Congratulations.
So yesterday was really nice.
It was beautiful, a really nice reception, and the people were so affirming. Just, their presence, the applause, the sense of, unity that I felt and belonging was so important to me. And given the fact I'm only here 6 months, it was totally unexpected. I mean, it far surpassed my every expectation.
Why is that important to you? You said it was important.
It's important because, in the priesthood, Jim, we don't look for affirmation in terms of pay raises or ranks. The former is dictated by the bishop, and the second, quite honestly, is political. We look for affirmation from the people we serve. If the people are happy, we're happy, because that's our primary concern. We're ordained to serve. And that means, as I said at the tail end of my comments, to actually love the people of God with my whole heart to the point where I see them as my spouse, as the bearer of my children. And I felt that. I really felt that from the people of St. Matthew Parish. And granted, it was one Mass out of several that are celebrated here on a Sunday, but there were people that went out of their way to change the routines. People that would normally attend the 5:30 on Saturday night came to a 12:30 Sunday morning Mass, and it was just, for me, magnificent and humbling.
How proud were your parents?
Oh, they were beaming. They were beaming. I think when I first came down to Charlotte, I think they felt a bit guilty because they felt like, I gave up this magnificent parish I had in Basking Ridge where I was pastor, where I had been for 9 years. And it took me a good part of that time to get things where I wanted them, people programs, my staff, additions to the school and to the church. And I finally had things where I wanted them, where I could sort of kick back, actually. And, we don't have a crystal ball telling us what the future will entail. Little did I know that when my parents retired 9 years ago, that 6 years into that, they would both come down with chronic illnesses that required assistance. And a couple of visits down here convinced me that, maybe God's asking you to come down here. And I fought it at first because I didn't want to give up my little kingdom. I didn't want to give up what was familiar to me. But then I felt like, it's the people down there need a shepherd's care too. It's not like I'm giving up the priesthood. I'm going to focus my energy first and foremost on helping my parents get back on their feet. And so when I approached my bishop with my feelings, he was very receptive. And Bishop Bukowski granted me a personal leave of absence so that I had no responsibilities in terms of pastoral care down here. All I had to do was live with the folks and take care of them. And that's what I did, full time, for the first 14 months here. And then what happened was, little by little, I started looking up classmates from the seminary, Father Gary being one of them in Mint Hill, Father Kessler in Statesville being another. I became friends with Father Reed, who needed assistance for coverage at St. Anne's, and also Father Fitzgibbons in Albemarle. So I was helping out basically at those 4 places. It never dawned on me to approach Monsignor and ask him, do you need help here in Charlotte? Because I knew he always had 4 priests, and I thought, he has an abundance of priests. He doesn't need a priest. So I just did that for the first 14 months, and that was fine. But then when I felt like my parents were stable enough, I approached Bishop Jugas about the possibility of helping out in a parish down here, and preferably one in Charlotte, so that I could still help my parents, but at the same time engage myself in ministry. And he was very receptive to that. And little did I expect him to assign me to St. Matthew's, which happens to be my parents' home parish. And that was such a wonderful surprise, because they live 2 miles from the church. So I'm still able to assist them, help them out with things. They're not to the point where they need to be in an assisted living facility, but they still need some assistance here and there with different things. And so I'm glad I can be there for them when they need me. And Monsignor is very good about giving me the time I need and the freedom I need to do that. At the same time, I'm blessed to be a parochial vicar, which allows me to engage myself in full-time pastoral care, be it anointing people who are ill at the hospitals, presiding at a funeral, officiating at a wedding, engaging in some counseling, preaching on a daily basis, and now I'll be making my debut tonight teaching adults in a course entitled We Believe, which is a study on the profession of faith. So all these different aspects of pastoral ministry, which first interested me in becoming a diocesan priest, are things that I'm doing again, and I feel like I've been renewed. So, if you will, the celebration that we had yesterday sort of anointed me anew, if you will, to engage in this ministry in earnest, and I'm happy to do so. And I have to say that the priest, the deacons, people in lay leadership, they've all been very cooperative and collaborative with me. The people of the parish have been very welcoming and receptive. Bishop Jugas has been very kind to me. So it's been an all-round good experience.
Reflect back on 30 years as a priest. A lot of people tend to think that it's a lonely life. It's a very quiet. But you seem to have had a good, fun run at it so far.
Yeah, well, I won't lie and say we never have moments of loneliness. We do. I mean, that's part of our charism, part of the celibacy charism, that, you know, that solitude that we experience is precisely there for God, but it's also the charism by which we're able to totally love the people entrusted to our pastoral care with our whole hearts, as if they were our spouse or bearer of our children. But it's a busy life. I think perhaps looking back at the 30 years, the most frustrating time for me were perhaps the 3 years I spent in Rome, because I was newly ordained. And after completing 4 years of seminary in Maryland, the last thing I expected Cardinal McCarrick to ask of me was to go on for more schooling. So it was another 3 years, and this time I was in a place that was totally foreign to me. I was required to learn Italian for my classes. And while there's a lot of history in Rome, and I was very blessed to be so close to the Vatican, the truth is I had a job to do, and that was to complete my doctorate. And really, you're on your own in terms of how you get that finished. I mean, the actual writing of the dissertation took me 2 years, and that meant discipline, and that meant, you know, sitting at my desk every day for 4 to 6 hours a day, handing in chapters, which sometimes came back to me with so much red ink it looked like an elephant hemorrhaged. But I did it. I did it because I remember the dean of theology at the Jesuit university where I was studying said to us, you diocesan priests have to believe in your hearts that this is where God actually wants you right now, that this is your mission. And that was really one of the things that helped me stay focused, to believe that this was God's providence for me, that He wanted me to do this degree.
Talk to me about that. Talk to me about
Sure.
your relation, your meeting.
Well, the first year I worked with mothers, sisters, I worked with her postulants and novices in a town called Casalina, which is 4 bus rides away from the center of Rome. And it was delightful. I mean, I had to be there at 6 in the morning, so there's nobody on mass transit at those hours. It was great getting out there, no problem. And I would say mass, and then the sisters were very warm and loving and receiving me. And then I would come home. But when I was going to the soup kitchen, I really saw them in action. I saw how they, you know, were really the servants of the poorest of the poor. And Mother was always upbeat. I mean, she had a lot on her plate. And I remember my last encounter with her, It was the day of my doctoral defense. It was a Saturday. And I had the 6 o'clock morning mass with the sisters. I didn't know Mother was in town, but she's seated there with everybody else. And imagine, Jim, how humbling it is to attempt to preach the gospel to somebody who hasn't totally interiorized it. And I said to the sisters after preaching, "Sisters, you have to pray for me, because at 4 o'clock this afternoon, I'm going before a hungry board of Jesuits to defend a 400-page book that nobody's going to read." And they giggled. And then afterwards, Mother came up to me and said, "Father, you're going to be fine, but pray for us, because later, tomorrow, we're opening a house in Albania." Now, you have to understand, at that time, Albania was still communist. So by her stating that and what she was attempting to do, a calm came over me. And everything sort of fell into proper perspective. And she helped me to realize, why am I worried about this degree? I've done my homework. I worked hard. I'll give it my best shot. What happens, happens. This woman is living the gospel. She's got a bigger nut to crack. And so I went into my defense with that in mind, and I did well because of it. And I really attribute that to her intercession. You know, I was not surprised when I heard that Pope Francis is going to canonize her this September. I was surprised that it took as long as it did to get to this point. I thought she would be canonized within 5 years after her death. And here it's 15 years. Mm-hmm. But I have to say the highlight of my time in Rome was both meeting her and meeting Pope St. John Paul, which I only had the opportunity to do once. It was the Feast of St. Nicholas, and he used to invite priests and several lay people to come to his morning mass. And again, it was very early in the morning. And basically, you can celebrate the Mass in the language of the day. So that day it was English, and it was very, very nice, because afterwards he came up to each of us and he presented a little rosary to us, and then he shook our hands and asked what diocese we were from. And he immediately knew Metuchen because he founded it. I mean, he's the one who established it in 1981. So that was remarkable. I have no complaints. I mean, to think that this boy from New Jersey, who was never very involved with church other than going to Mass, you know, I was never an altar server. I didn't belong to the youth group. I played the organ, and so I would accompany the choir at some Masses occasionally, but I wouldn't call myself, you know, as the French say, a flea of the sacristy. I was not. I just basically attended Mass. But here, in God's providence, somehow I got drawn into it. And as a result of that, ended up going to New Mexico for 2 years, Maryland for 4 years, Rome for 3 years, Portugal for another summer, all related to ministry, all related to the priesthood, all related to the call. And, you know, growing up, I never played Mass like some of my classmates claim to have done. I never pretended to be a priest. I never dressed up as a priest. I didn't have my hope chest full of chasubles and chalices. I was just an ordinary guy who thought he'd be a high school French and Spanish teacher. I set out to do that. I got certified to do that. And I thought, here is my life. But
little did you know.
Little did I know.
So share with me something people don't know about you when they see you up on the altar. What can you share?
I'm a frustrated golfer. I caddied all through high school. My parents are both avid golfers. In fact, that's what led them to retire in Charlotte. My youngest brother is a golfer. I'm a horrible golfer. I'm not good at it. So when people ask me, are you a golfer, I automatically say no. Because to me,
like it?
I do like it. It's one of the few games.
You're just terrible at it.
I'm just terrible at it. You know, I just can't do it. And that's frustrating for a perfectionist. But I keep going back for more. I haven't touched a club in about 2 years. But every once in a while, I go back. And, you know, the funny thing about golf is it is a game of skill and practice. And I'm not very patient. when it comes to that game. Because in my mind, because I caddied and could tell people what club to use and how many yards it was to the green, I should be good. I know how to keep my head down. I just don't do it.
That's funny.
I know how to take a full swing. I just don't do it.
That's funny.
And so that's one thing. Another thing people don't know about me is I love horseback riding. While I was in Basking Ridge, my last pastorate, I took it up. There was the horse stables right behind us. About 40 acres behind us was a beautiful county-owned stables. And I started taking lessons and found it very relaxing to go out on the trails. I have not been able to do so since I arrived here, but I'm still looking for a place that has trails where I could go horseback riding. And when I say horseback riding, it's just, you know, a slow canter, a trot on the back of a horse, Western style. I'm not doing steeplechase, I'm not doing dressage, but I enjoy it. I enjoy it very much. It's very relaxing. I enjoy reading. I'm a voracious reader. And going on long walks with my schnauzer Chantal. And I think that sums up my hobbies, basically.
Favorite food?
Pizza.
Favorite place to be?
Paris. I do cook for myself. I do my own grocery shopping, my own laundry. I clean my own place. You know, I help.
What's the one thing you hate that you have to do for yourself?
I hate grocery shopping.
Why?
Because it brings back memories of working in supermarkets when I was in college and seminary. And it was not a happy time because some of the managers were very demanding, overly demanding. Some of the customers were. And it's not so much the shopping part, it's putting the stuff away when I get home. I've had 2 back surgeries, so to carry this stuff can be a pain sometimes. And to have to put the stuff away. But you know, look at, my parents can't do it, so I have to do it. I mean, it's almost like you have 3 people who are broken. You know, I've had 2 back surgeries. My mother has her ailments, my dad has his. So really, when push comes to shove, I have to do that stuff.
Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Good question. And I don't know. I'd like to think I'll be a pastor somewhere down here in Charlotte, but I don't know what God has planned for me. So I try to stay open. I'll never forget what Mother Teresa said. If you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. Because quite often what we plan doesn't happen the way we think. In my mind, I was going to eventually retire in Sausalito, California. That to me was like Paradise Park, going to Marin County. And I love San Francisco, I like Sausalito, the Bay Area, and I really thought, you know, I'd retire there. I never thought I would be working in Charlotte, never dreamt I would, you know, I would come down to visit my folks, but did I feel drawn to stay here? Not at the time, no. It never occurred to me. I always thought, I'm going to stay in New Jersey, retire at 70, and then move to California. But you know, what's happened to my parents and what's happened to me as a result of them has taught me, don't talk too far into the future because we really don't know how things are going to turn out. What we do know is that God will be with us wherever that is, and that's my comfort. So I think if this whole experience has taught me anything, it has taught me to just trust in providence, that God wills what's best for us, and we just have to trust that he'll see to it that we do what he wants us to do if we keep an open mind and are willing to say yes to whatever that is.